A lot going on. Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway, Counselor to the President of the United States. Kellyanne, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You know, after a couple of days ago, after the President tweeted, hey, Russia, look out, they're coming, something to that effect, it seemed like the strike might happen right then, the next day. Now here we are a couple of days later. People are presuming we're just verifying things, we're making plans. Do you think that's accurate?
Well, it's accurate that the president was being very deliberative and very careful in making sure that what our intelligence community suspected happened indeed did happen. And the president has also said that he will hold responsible Syria, Iran, Russia, anybody who's causing trouble in that area that leads to the death and destruction of innocent civilians. And people will note that almost to the day, 1 year ago, when Assad gassed his own people, this president took swift action as well. And he has proven in the past that once those indices are verified, that he acts accordingly. The same will happen here. But Syria must allow international cooperation. They must allow monitoring in the area. And Assad has been terrible to his people. And this is a president who, when he saw those babies gasping for the last breaths last year, being poisoned by their own, quote, leader, and in conferring with his team, his national security intelligence team last year, as he did again this year, he will take swift action. He's made that very clear.
All right, Kellyanne, let's talk about James Comey's new book that comes out on Tuesday. Some of the excerpts were released overnight, and the president, who is being called unethical, they're comparing him, or James Comey's comparing him to a mob boss. He's saying, I'm sorry to Hillary Clinton. What's the president's reaction?
Well, I'll give you my reaction. I have discussed this with the president. I'll give you my reaction. This man, I spend more time in the Oval Office in a given day than this man got to spend with the president over the course of his very brief tenure before he was fired. He's taking 1 or 2 or 3 meetings with the president and retroactively putting his own spin on them to sell books. It seems to me like he sounds like a disgruntled ex-employee who, after the fact, wants to clear his conscience of what bothered him at the time. If you're that bothered, quit. Leave the job. And whether there's an active investigation going on with Mr. Mueller, you've got the former FBI director out there talking not under oath. Nobody, as we know, nobody who writes books and goes on TV is under oath. He's doing that. I find it to be pretty self-aggrandizing. These clips I saw the ABC released a clip today.
Hey, you know what? Let's watch today. Let's watch together because we haven't seen it. We just read it.
And then I want to comment on something. Yes.
You got it. Let's listen to James Comey talk about the dossier.
The dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
No, I didn't even think I used the term "steal dossier." I just talked about additional material.
But did he have a right to know that?
That had been financed by his political opponents? I don't know the answer to that. It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
Well, is that a sufficient explanation for why he didn't say who financed it?
Of course it's not. But remember, he was at an FBI that didn't seem too worried about telling people who had financed it at the time. Look, Comey and his boss, President Obama, and Attorney General Lynch, they all were backing the wrong horse. They thought somebody else was going to win. And we would never know so much that we're still finding out had that person who lost the election and shouldn't have, whose name I don't say on TV anymore, actually won. And the fact is that George Stephanopoulos asked a battery of the right questions. Don't you think that the president-elect had a right to know where this dossier came to be, how it was being financed? And I want to say, because I said it at the time on many different networks, and people pushed back and called me very bad things, the idea that they had an intelligence briefing with the president-elect on January 6th in Trump Tower with Mr. Brennan, Mr. Clapper, Mr. Comey, and then after that was done, Comey hung back with the president-elect and talked a little bit about the dossier, and we're looking into this, and makes it sound like it was some big briefing when it was a hangback,
well,
as far as we know. Yes?
According to the book, at that hangback, Mr. Comey confirmed what your boss has said all along. He says, we are not investigating you, Donald Trump. Now, here's something else. This also a brand new clip from ABC. They've got the big 2020 special on Comey on Saturday. Here they are talking about Mrs. Trump.
And then he says something that distracted me, because he said, you know, if there's even a 1% chance my wife thinks that's true, that's terrible. I'm a flawed human being, but there's literally 0 chance that my wife would think that was true. So what kind of marriage to what kind of man does your wife think there's only a 99% chance you didn't do that? And
Okay, so he's getting into that kind of stuff,
too. Yeah, no, he's a psychoanalyst. He's giving advice on how people look. He's a marriage counselor. I find that particular excerpt to be really egregious and over the top and unacceptable. And I hope people of all political stripes, including those who didn't like Jim Comey in late October 2016, to really push back on it. Frankly put, that's none of his business. And the idea, and him really, again, retroactively putting his own spin on private conversations with the president-elect. If he had respect for the office of the presidency and for his job as the FBI director and for the president-elect indeed, he would have sat the man down and given a full briefing or made it part of the other conversation under the guise of, oh, it could have been embarrassing. I didn't want to embarrass him. So then you go out a year and a half later and sell books.
Right.
Well, we have
not under oath.
We have one more that we're just getting from GMA. Watch this, and we'll get your reaction.
Elect Trump's first question was to confirm that it had no impact on the election. And then the conversation, to my surprise, moved into a PR conversation about how the Trump team would position this and what they could say about this. They actually started talking about drafting a press release. Intelligence, the White House does PR and spin.
You also said you were struck by what they didn't ask.
Very much. No one, to my recollection, asked, so what's coming next from the Russians? How might we stop it? What's the future look like? It was all, what can we say about what they did and how it affects the election that we just had?
What is he, Nostradamus? He wants to. So can you recount from your perspective what it was like when they dropped this news, and why the White House's reaction wasn't, what's next? What are they going to do? Well, number one, the election's over, so the impact is being analyzed by the professionals. Do you have a problem with what he wanted you to say, or the White House to say?
Brian, it's the FBI director's job to come in and tell the president-elect everything that they knew about alleged Russian interference. He didn't do that. Why is it up to the president-elect and the members of the team who were in there? And I had been with the president-elect right before that at a different meeting outside the building. And because I didn't have my security clearance yet, I was not in that particular meeting. But I know people who were, including the president-elect. Why didn't the FBI director and the outgoing CIA director and the others, the DNI director, why aren't they telling them in full what happened? I take umbrage that people who were learning things for the very first time were trying to put PR spin on it. Oh, I was shocked they didn't ask the following questions. You know who didn't ask those questions? Him and his boss, President Obama. They knew about Russian interference, but they figured Hillary Clinton would, oh, I said her name, darn it. They figured that woman who lost the election, whose name I don't say on TV, would have won the election, so we'd never have to deal with Russian interference.
He actually said that, but Kellyanne, let me ask something. What does the president plan on saying about this? I know he's going to be tempted to weigh in right away, but what do you think the president's going to say about this when he gets more information or reads it himself?
Well, the president has a right to weigh in because you have one person's account of meetings that happen between two people, and he's the other person. And I've discussed it directly with him. He has a different recollection of these matters, and he's not out there trying to sell books. He's too busy cutting our taxes and reducing our regulations and keeping us all safe and renegotiating trade agreements. And I have to say again, when the president fired Jim Comey, he gave an interview to a different network where he did note that the man is a showboat and a grandstander. I'll add sanctimonious. I think people are seeing that. If you don't like the job you have, I say to the same people who work here and have in the past, if you don't like the job you have, if you think that you're working in a place that's doesn't comport with the workplace where you want to be, leave. He didn't do that.
It's that easy.
He got fired.
But
He got fired, and he never objected to any of this. I will say one thing, though. Jim Comey is unlike these other people writing books. At least he made it into the Oval Office and had interaction with the president.
Will the president respond? The book comes out on Tuesday once the president reads all of it.
Yeah. He may, but he's asked for a number of us to respond, and I'm happy to do it.
Just stand by for some tweets. Meanwhile, speaking of he was fired, there have been some who have said that Rod Rosenstein should be fired because he's handling the subpoenas and stuff like that over the Department of Justice, and he's been dragging his feet. It's just so weird. I know he met there at the White House yesterday. It's so weird that we've got a Republican president and a Republican running the Department of Justice in the form of Jeff Sessions, and yet Rod Rosenstein doesn't really seem to be helping Congress do their due diligence over this investigation.
Well, Congress has made clear that they want the production of these documents to accelerate, and there is a new gentleman who's been on your network recently who's in charge of that.
Mr. Lausch.
That's right, and that he has said that it will go more expeditiously. And this White House has been complying with every request that we've received, over 20 witnesses, over 20,000 or so documents, I'm told. And the same goes, and we respect the process up on Capitol Hill as well. But the Deputy Attorney General was here yesterday meeting with the President, the Chief of Staff, for a routine meeting. And he continues in his job today. But I do see people making different. Well, I do see people saying, "Do this, do that, do this, do that." This is President Donald Trump, and as Jim Comey found out, the president makes his own decisions, and he has a right to.
Sure.
And nobody should get ahead of that or in the way of that.
Okay. Good enough. Kellyanne.
Remember, people who write books are not under oath. Don't forget it while you read these excerpts, folks.
We remember. All right. Kellyanne, thank you very much.
Was fired. Take care.